Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Rex Nazarko, the Executive Director of AMEEN, and I am joined here by two great community leaders, Brother Jaylani Hussain, who is the CAIR Minnesota Executive Director and also one of the co-founders of the Abandon Biden, now Abandon Harris movement, and Dr. Abdulmajid Katranji, who is the president of the American Muslim Engagement and Empowerment Network, or AMEEN. In this podcast segment, we will be talking about the Muslim vote, its power, and its agency to determine this upcoming election. Brother Jaylani, Dr. Katranji, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to open it up with the very first question. Can the Muslim vote change the election?
Yes. Very simple. It doesn't require a lot of explanation. The numbers, the statistics, and the data, if you're looking at every state, especially if you look at the 2016 numbers, the 2020 numbers, there's some very good polling data that shows you that in 2016, there was a group that voted extremely third party, and therefore President Trump won for his term, defeating Hillary Clinton, whom everybody believed would take Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Now, fast forward to 2020, those same numbers, those same variances where they were going to the third party actually went to the Democratic Party, allowing for that narrow margin of victory, again in those same states, for President Biden to win. So those numbers that you're looking at was actually a significant number of those votes were Muslim American votes. So across the country, as the Muslim American population increases and establishes themselves as a critical component of the American civil society, you're finding, and as they become more politically aware and politically astute, you're finding more and more that in these elections, Muslim Americans have a tremendous role to be the margin of victory.
Yeah, and I would just completely agree, and I would go down a little bit more into some of the numbers. So the first most important thing Muslims need to understand is that president's elections are won by electoral college, which means each state is given a certain number of votes that then translate to the actual number at the end, which every president needs a minimum of 270 electoral college votes. And so it's not just the number of Muslims, it's where Muslims live, in contrary where the election is tight. And that's where comes the swing state votes. And so there are 7 swing state votes, and in December of this past year, in 2023, we met here in Michigan to review the Muslim political power and brought Muslims from Michigan and mainly all of the 7 swing states. And then we said, what is the Muslim numbers in these states? Who votes? And what was the vote difference? What we came up with is, for example, Georgia, the estimate is almost about 80,000 Muslims. The difference was 10,000, which meant the Muslims were 8 times impacting that election. Arizona, we estimate about 50,000 Muslim voters. The difference there was 10,000. So if Muslims in Arizona and Georgia, we're talking about 1 in 8 in Georgia and 1 in 5 in Arizona, just came out and did the opposite, that election would go toward, definitely would not go supporting, at the time, Biden and now Harris. If you go beyond that and you go to places like Michigan, the same thing with those numbers, where Muslims can impact the election specifically. And if you go to Wisconsin, for example, 22,000 Muslim voters, or 20,000 Muslim voters, the number is around 22,000 was the margin of difference. And so Muslim American, and by the way, these numbers are Muslims that are voting, so we know there are a lot more that are staying home that could potentially even increase that number. So actually, back in December, we already announced that if just Muslims were willing to use their vote as a way to show that genocide cannot be rewarded and should be accountable, that in that moment, Biden already lost the election. And this is December of 2023. Later on now, as we're here today, literally days away from the election, all of what we have been talking about has been true. We know that as we look closer to these numbers, that is true. Muslims are impactful. And in fact, I'll end by saying President Trump, and this is probably something that many Muslims never imagined, that President Trump, in his support for Muslims, said that Muslims are the deciding vote, the deciding population in Michigan and then in the country. So when you have a candidate who's running for the United States presidency, uttering the fact that it's the Muslim vote that will tip the scale of the election, and Muslims themselves do not believe it, it is really a challenge for us. And so we need political education, we need political awareness, and we need to really realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala naturally put us in places where we can have power. The question now is, how do we leverage that power in a way where we really become the Americans that save America from itself?
So I wanna stop on this point a little bit because, well, first of all, you don't need a genius to see the agitation behind APAC at this current moment. You said it very well that Muslims, a lot of Muslims within our communities ourselves, we're still having these conversations, are questioning the power of their vote and the political agency that they will get in this moment. I always tell them history provides very small windows of opportunity to catapult yourselves into power. And Muslims, subhanAllah, almost like a miracle, were put in the most strategic, crucial states to determine a razor-thin presidential election. So a congregation in a masjid, one congregation of 600-700 people, could actually be the deciding factor for a state like Michigan all by itself.
Absolutely.
So I think the candidates know this, they recognize it, but there's a few very interesting dynamics that have developed out of it. Number one, the apathy of the Democratic Party towards the Muslim vote, especially in these last 2 months. Not only have they ignored us, they have blatantly started disrespecting us. We've seen it with the deplatforming of Muslims at the DNC, who rightfully earned their position there through voting uncommitted. And then most recently with one of our community members and someone who is I would say a high profile Muslim Democrat who actually ran as a congressman.
He was a candidate. He was a candidate running for. I mean, this is not like a small position.
And him being thrown out of a campaign, we see this almost intentional neglect that the Democrats are putting behind the Muslim vote, whereas I would have never imagined that the Republicans would have started engaging us more directly.
Well,
so I want to stop there for a moment. I want to see, how do you see these dynamics developing, and how do you see us going forward to capitalize on these kind of dynamics? How is that going to shift the political arena for Muslims and the political framework?
So look, in terms of the Democratic Party, they have a historic approach on this concept of minority politics, minority identity politics. So they have this idea that if you can hit and ring the bell on a few things, then that particular minority, regardless of whether you're resonating with their traditional values or their core values, they're automatically going to default to the Democratic Party. Why? Because they're going to resonate the idea, the fear that, on the Republican side or on a third party side, either your vote doesn't count or not going to count, and therefore, or that the other side will never respect you and never accept you like we can accept you. And both issues are categorically untrue. This is actually a very tricky form of voter suppression, right? This assumption that, and this is actually the lesson they didn't learn in 2016, because it was basically the same strategy they had, with the assumption that African American men are going to vote for Hillary Clinton automatically, which turns out that was not the case. Yes, they may have in large numbers did vote for her, but there was a significant number that did not vote for her. Because they did have significant issues that needed to be addressed that the Democratic Party, which claims that it represents their interests, continues to fail to address even till today. And we can even see that divide not only with our community, but even in the Latino community, with the African American, especially African American male community, the Muslim American community. So the critical thing for Muslims to understand is you're an American now. You're in America, you have the right to vote. You got to make sure that you're registered. Don't let people convince you that your vote. The worst thing is even in our own community where they either try to tell you voting is haram or that everything's already been predetermined. That is the worst thing that can be done. You're suppressing yourself, which is that means you're the one giving up. You'll only have yourself to blame. You have that power. That power means something. And I'll tell you that as they're looking at the numbers, as these numbers are pushing through, there's a reason why President Trump was in Dearborn yesterday, okay? There's a reason why he's actively engaging these individuals. There's a reason why some of the Muslim community leaders are scrambling to announce who they're voting for or endorsing. If your vote wasn't important, they would not have wasted their time. So you really have to understand that your value as a voter is absolutely critical to all these campaigns. Not in just this campaign. Every campaign moving forward, You're now present. You're real. You're a statistic that is significant that they're going to follow and follow through. And like you pointed out, I think beautifully, alhamdulillah, subhanallah, all of us are in these key swing states. There's a rising Muslim population in Arizona, rising Muslim population in Nevada, rising Muslim population in Pennsylvania, rising one in Wisconsin, in Georgia, in North Carolina, and in Michigan. Ironically, all of these states are the swing states, but also if you're looking at population dynamics, these are also the states that are experiencing increasing numbers of Muslims. So really important to understand that that value, that importance of being a voter and being active is not only your duty as an American, but your responsibility as a Muslim American, not only to your community, but to America as a whole.
And I'll just add by saying, to the many Muslims who find excuses not to vote, what is going to be your message back to the people of Gaza? Imagine someone who's in Gaza right now who lost an entire family, and they got an opportunity to be a citizen of the United States just for one day on election day. What do you think they would do? So I want people to understand that the ballot box is an opportunity, and if you don't vote, I want you to know the way that the math works. If you don't vote, you naturally agree with whoever the winner is. That's how it works. If you're literally removing yourself from the process by saying, I don't care who wins, I'm supporter of whoever wins.
So it's essentially an indirect endorsement.
An indirect endorsement to whoever wins.
Correct.
And that itself means that you're responsible for whatever that person does. The only way to claim your voice is to go to the ballot box and choose a candidate that speaks directly to what you need. And I think that our community, there are many people, especially the suburbs, who, if you're not voting early, we recommend people to vote early. But if you're not voting early and you're voting on Tuesday, make a plan. The first and most important thing in the United States, the time that you take off of work to go vote is actually sacred. It is law in the United States. You can take time off of your busy job, even if you're working at a factory, if you're working at wherever you're working, you can take time off to go and vote, as long as you need to be able to vote. If you're in that line for an hour or 2 hours and your job is calling you, you can still take that time off as long as you're communicating with your employer. I want you to know that we all protested. We spoke to the top of the mountain. We did everything possible. We talked to among ourselves. We consoled our brothers and sisters from Gaza, Palestinians who lost their family members. We visited them in their homes. We said all of the things we had to say. And then on the day that matters the most, we're going to stay at home.
Correct.
I want you to know, politicians have only one day that matters to them, election day. They have no power that day. We have the power. And that is why they're scared. That's why they're coming to us. That's why opportunities are being raised. And I think it's time for the American Muslim community here to realize one thing. We may be the most powerful Muslim community in the world. If we can leverage our nation to be good to not only what's happening in Gaza, but all over the world, we can play a role in creating a world that reflects the ideals and the morals of the things that we value the most. So do not take this day lightly. Please make sure you challenge other people. Did you not vote, brother? Did you not vote? And if they tell you, well, brother, just say, okay, then you and the people of Gaza will have a day that will come where you're going to have to explain why you didn't use your political power to stand against genocide.
And beyond that, one thing I always tell people is the tragedy of Gaza is one of the several other tragedies that we also understand. Look at, in India, there's the suppression of Muslims, active suppression of their political rights. So these are people who are supposed to have rights. Their rights are being suppressed. So why you, as a Muslim American, would deny yourself those very rights that are actually given to you freely and encourage you for you to use? You're also providing a disservice, because I'll tell you, India values its relationship with America. If we can then be a power here, we can also highlight what's happening to all the Muslim centers in India. We also had a Muslim brother that was murdered by and executed in Missouri, right? Khalifa Williams, Marcellus Williams, right? Rahimahullah. So African American man, innocent, railroaded by the process. Even the prosecutor said that this person may be innocent, recommended a delay or stay of the execution, and yet he was still executed. And the irony here, this was under the administration where it could have at least said, we're going to issue a Department of Justice review. Okay, this is so the issues of Gaza is a crystallization of all the other issues that we as Muslim Americans do face, from whether it's immigration or economy or healthcare things that we're all part of. I'm a physician, I'm a surgeon, I'm a business owner, a private business owner, engineer.
I'm an urban planner.
Urban planner.
Political
Okay,
engineer.
so I mean, so he's, so all of us reflect different facets of this fabric. We're part and parcel of the American thing. So
I think
to
that's-
stay away from it is horrible.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the key things that, so first of all, political parties thought of the Muslim community as a voter monolith up until this point. And in particular, following 9/11 and the kind of traumatic surveillance and Patriot Act repercussions that the Muslims underwent,
By both political parties.
by both political parties, of course. So I always say this, that the Republicans are very upfront about what they do. The Democrats present this softer front rhetorically, but they enable the same policies, which is actually more dangerous in my opinion, simply because they dilute any sort of momentum behind these efforts. So for example, I'll take Zionism as an example, right? Republicans are very overtly Zionist from what we see. They proclaim it openly, they speak to it, and they speak to Israel's need to be strong and to assert its strength. The Democrats on the other side are big proponents of the two-state solution. But when we look behind the curtain, what do we see? We see that military funding is still going through to Israel. The rhetoric about Israel needing to defend itself is there. The dehumanization of the Muslim and the Arab component in that entire situation is present in their rhetoric as well. Where is the difference? Because to me, this seems like a soft enablement of Zionism, one that actually really silences you because it promises you that things will change. So if you have momentum, if you have a movement that's behind it, they say, there's no need for this movement. We got it. Just work within the process and we'll take care of it. I think they underestimated the fact that Muslims were politically aware of a lot of these things. They were fed up. We have a certain fitra to us. We have a certain intuition that allows us to, in times of crisis, I would say, not only rally behind a cause, but also dissect where have we gone wrong. And that's not to say that, a democratic component within the Muslim community is not needed. It most likely is, because we want to be present in all conversations.
No, Muslims should be in every party.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think what was underestimated was this idea that we were victims. And I don't think we see ourselves as victims.
No, but I think one thing we have to be very clear about is that I didn't anticipate there would come a day where Liz Cheney and Bill Clinton would speak to Muslims as if they didn't know who they were.
Correct.
Right, and I think what's happening right now is that we are seeing a major political shift within the Muslim community, and that major political shift has significant consequences for us as a Muslim community, but also to the general American public. I want you to know that many people at home, the overwhelming majority of Americans, 70%, support the end of this war. I mean, think about that. We're not fighting the majority. We actually are in the majority. Yet, what happens with policies and politics is that the American political system projects false and narratives to be able to make sure that people are not aware of what's happening. You've seen now on CNN and many of these national news where they continue to frame an entire genocide as a humanitarian crisis, as if somehow there was just a zilzal or some sort of an earthquake and people just need help, right? And they're not understanding that our United States tax dollars are being sent across. And for the first time, we are seeing voices that we have heard from the Muslim community has heard, who have historically demonized us, who are now waking up to saying, as a mother, I cannot explain this away. I cannot explain all these children, 20,000 plus children to die in my name. I don't want to be part of that. And it's coming from the spaces that historically we haven't seen allyship, which tells me what is happening within the democratic circles and those who are around it is that it has always been performative allyship. That allyship was meant to only be able to create a narrative that we are being protected. But when it came to protecting the innocent children, because this war will go down in history as the lone war for America. There's no one else supporting them. It is Israel, the United States, and some random islands. Nobody even knows where they are. That's it. There's nobody else supporting. They don't have allies. There's nobody.
There's actually international precedent behind embargoes now. We have France, we have the Great Britain,
And these are the allies
and
of
we
the
have
United
Spain.
States.
Correct. So there's NATO countries setting a precedent for us to follow.
And
an embargo.
let's take a different argument, okay? we've had horrible hurricanes, 2 horrible hurricanes, okay, that wiped out tens of billions of dollars in businesses and homes, etc. The Small Business Administration ran out of funds. So somebody justified to me how we're able to send $60 billion to Israel, and yet we're not promptly, within a week, having an emergency session and sending 60 billion, if not all the billions necessary, to the south, right? To Florida, to Georgia, to every state, North Carolina. North Carolina still has areas where they don't have electricity. This is America. So as Muslim Americans, that's the thing, that's the power we have. It's that we're not just about being Muslim, we're about being American.
Absolutely.
We got to make sure that America's vital interests are protected. When America is injured by a natural disaster, why aren't we actively moving? So why are we making sure that funds are reaching Israel? We're not making sure funds are reaching the SBA to get down, or FEMA, to get down to the south to help everybody out there. Because there are people still in need. There are still hospitals that still need resources. We're short IV fluids right now because the factory that manufactures IV fluids was in North Carolina, got destroyed. This is critical infrastructure stuff. So somebody explain to me why my $12,000 or $16,000 that now I owe in taxes for Israel is not the $12,000 or $16,000 that's going to the south. So that's the issue. The other thing is we're looking at a First Amendment issue, right? As a Muslim American voter, our right. Why do we love being in the United States? The freedom of speech and freedom of religion. There is no place on this earth that allows me to be the proud Muslim and the proud American that I can be without that First Amendment. Now, the scary thing is under Democratic leadership, and I'm not trying to say Democrat, Republican, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, but we are watching visibly people trying to suppress the First Amendment. That now we're saying that certain speech is now being defined, and it's not being defined in the sense that it needs to be defined. Listen, any form of racism I will not tolerate. Any form of hate I will not tolerate. But if I'm critical of Israel as a country, that has nothing to do with my friends who are Jewish. Nothing, that doesn't change my respect for my Jewish friends who want to support the state of Israel. But I'm going to call a spade a spade. Why am I not going to be accused of anti-Japanese, being anti-Japanese if I'm critical of Japan, or anti-Russian if I'm critical of Russia, or if I'm critical of this regime or that regime, Saudi Arabia, if I'm critical, none of that is good. Okay, I'm not anti-Arab if I criticize Egypt if they have a policy.
So I want to
right?
stop.
But
I want to stop there
it's
for
a First
second.
Amendment,
So I think going back to the power of the agency and the relevance of the Muslim vote, I think Muslims are at the forefront of actually exposing a hypocritical system behind the enabling of not only Israel and Zionism, but a direct threat to America's domestic integrity. I mean, I think Israel could very well be framed as a national security threat at this point, just from the fact that so much money and so many resources are going to it. On top of that, it's destabilizing regions. It's threatening to pull other actors into a potential global conflict. Muslims are at the forefront with their vote, not just to save Gaza, not just to promote the Muslim interest. I think it's the soul of America at this point, that America has to make a choice at this crossroads of history. Does it want to continue to be the big bad bully who will eventually get challenged and taken down by someone else? Or will it ask for a managed, controlled pullback that allows the world to preserve stability, right? That allows the world to continue in its economic partnerships and peace, while at the same time ensuring that our foreign policy is moral and our domestic policy reflects the needs of our citizens. I think, we talk numbers, we say the Muslim vote can give the power to Republicans or Democrats or create a third party movement. I think what we really neglect is the Muslim vote quite literally has the power to change the trajectory of America.
Well, it already has. We have 2 independent candidates that have chosen Muslims as their vice presidents. That in itself is being lost in this conversation. Muslims have power. People are recognizing it. They're stepping toward it. And to your point, history is being written. We don't appreciate history when we live in it. But when we look back, there's this conversation that happens in America today where we romanticize the era of Dr. King and Malcolm X. When we actually explore that period of time, majority of people were not with them.
Right.
Majority of people were silent. Today, when we look back at these 2 big giants and we celebrate their history. We celebrate what they did. We celebrate their words, and they're timeless of what they said and what they impacted. So in this moment, while we feel like maybe many people are not with us, history will be on our side.
Right.
And there are going to be a younger generation of Americans that are going to wake up and are being born in this country, and they're going to look back in history books and they're going to say, why did we do that? What logic was being used? How did you get to that point? And why are we as a nation that should be investing in innovation to make the world better, right? To be able to create democracies and make sure that there's peace around the world, instead of being a nation that continues to profiteer from military-industrial complex. And these ideas seem big, but I think if you look at today what happens on college campuses, why did it happen on college campuses? Because historically, college campuses have been a place where there is a little bit of free-thinking Americans, where they're starting to explore and review the world that they live in and start to really ask these fundamental moral questions. Is this in the best interest for myself, my nation, and the people? And why can't I say this? Why are you denying me the ability to stand up and say there should be a free Palestine? And this is not fair. And so I think the American Muslim community is putting its mark in this moment. And I personally believe that generations will come and we'll see the American Muslim community as a community that continues to save this nation from itself.
It's almost a form of political dawah, if you want to think about it that way. We are redefining the nature of American politics and the systems that have been in power so far. I mean, there is definitely a large growing trend nationwide of Muslims leading the third party movement right now. They have embraced it, they have made it their own. They have said that we will not stand for the injustices on either side, and we will not stand for empty promises on whoever it's coming from, and we will not stand for this untouched, unchallengeable idea of Zionism that for the past 80 years has wreaked havoc on the American political system. It has kind of become a leech sucking the moral life out of the United States, especially with regards to its foreign policy in the Middle East, and I would say the broader region as well. There's a detach happening, and it's in the best interest not only of Muslims, it's in the best interest of Americans. I think it was emphasized earlier that 70%, it is a bipartisan thing. 70% of Americans don't want this genocide. They don't want this to keep unfolding. But the political nature of this country has become such that superficial issues, like abortion, for example, are put at the forefront of the political conversation, whereas in reality, both parties are enabling the military-industrial complex, profiteering, Zionism, dictatorships, and this sort of managed empire in a way. So the Muslim vote is giving political dawah. I think we're waking up.
What I would tell you is beyond. So look, what's critical here is that what's making the difference for Muslims to be that margin, right? As Muslim Americans, is that we're actually addressing issues that are affecting Americans, right? We are Muslims, but we live here. This is where we live, right? So
most of us don't have second citizenship. So most of us, a lot of us were born here, for example.
This is actually correct. Like this generation following this is actually now we're finally seeing that. First you actually had the African American Muslim population,
an indigenous element,
an indigenous American Muslim population. Then you had this big immigration spike that that kind of. But now again we're going back to that. My kids, myself, born and raised here. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. I love my home. You know what I'm saying? Very proud to live in Michigan. I lived in other states, came back to Michigan, right? So the critical issue here is that the issues that are affecting my neighbor, who is not Muslim, is the same issues that are affecting me, right? As a Muslim, but in a larger scale, it's like you said, there are issues that affect me directly because of some of the political issues, because of my freedom of speech and my freedom of religion, right? The freedom of opportunity, the freedom to be able to come to the United States, such as immigration issues. So a lot of these issues. Now, I understand there are issues of abortion, things like that are important to other people. When you're looking at that top 10 list, right, economy is always number one, regardless of what the politics is. And we're part of that fabric of the economy. It's important to then recognize that the Muslim American vote is that margin, right? Because when you're going out there, you're representing the larger view, the face of America, but now you're finally able to address those specifics that also affect us directly. The First Amendment being attacked and under constant attack is an issue. Okay, our justice system, in which, for instance, those young kids who protested at the University of Michigan, who executed their rights to protest. That's actually in the Constitution, right? Freedom of assembly. Correct. There's no. They weren't arrested up until the point that they decided they want to shut this thing down, right? And even the local prosecutors refused to prosecute, right? But instead, they were being prosecuted. By the way, the young men and women that are being prosecuted, some of them are Jewish, some of them are Muslim, so this isn't just Muslims.
Right.
But because now we're affected by issues of justice and the impact and the threat to our rights as Americans, then our mobility, our action becomes critical to vote. And that's why every single vote now means a huge difference, because, like you said, our vote is a reflection of the impact of the miscarriage of justice that we have seen over the past several months on a global level and also here domestically.
And I would just add by saying, a lot of times we also dismiss local elections, and which are critically important in our community. I think taking a step back, for the American Muslim community predominantly, we have heard and experienced the suffering from American imperialism to some extent and wars. And for many Americans, they have sent U.S. troops to Iraq, Afghanistan, both failures. All we have is families who are missing someone at the table, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's here, whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's here. And there are many people today who are at home who are wondering what's going on. Does that mean now my son or my brother or my friend or my neighbor is going to be sent to another endless war that we don't know why it was started, we don't know what we benefit off of it, and all we have created is enemies across the world, orphans across the world, and the world did not get better. And for who? Who benefited? And at the end of the day, it's always these weapon manufacturers who continuously create a world where everything will just end. Where really the reality is, if you go across the global world, most people just want to wake up in the morning, take care of their children, live a peaceful life, get a job, make sure that there's food at the table, and enjoy their family and relatives. That's what majority of people want in the world. But when we as a nation that has the technology, the resources to really encourage peace, to encourage and reward peace and use that as a tool, why is it that every time, especially now, we're seeing the Democrats, the Republicans have been the party of war. Now the Democrats are the party of war.
Which is a very interesting dynamic shift.
It doesn't make any sense.
That neocons have espoused themselves to Democrats.
And now you see Liz Cheney, and like the people, it just doesn't make any sense today that of all people, the Cheneys, who should just wither away, just get out of the fold of political space, because that name is a reminder that the United States failed in Iraq. They killed people and they lost their sons.
If I can stop.
You have a Cheney supporting a Democrat. You have a Kennedy supporting a Republican.
A Republican. It's a mess. So that I want to stop right there, because we're talking about the power of the Muslim vote to determine an election. I think the Muslim vote has already reshifted the entire political conversation without the election even happening yet. We are seeing candidates actively speak to our issues. We are seeing conversations change. We are seeing the reshifting of political alliances. An element like the neocons, who was staunchly Republican, is now becoming Democrat. So what does Republican and Democrat mean, and what is it going to look like 4 years from now? Trump is gone, either after this election if he loses, or in 4 years after his term runs out. What's the Republican Party going to look like after Trump? And what is the Democratic Party going to look like either after Kamala or during Kamala? How do we see these shifts?
I think the first and most important thing is the American Muslim community can no longer be boxed into one political party.
Correct.
Period. We are no longer monolithic. Our value is to make sure that both political parties are true to their core beliefs. And as a community, we are a moving and shifting political bloc. We will continue to stand for those who will do just and right, regardless of who supports justice. We will stand with them, and whoever is against justice, we will stand against them. And I think the American Muslim community, to see that this war in Gaza take a year long, where the first 4 months, and I'll take you back the first 4 months, the word ceasefire was a slur. I could not imagine. I mean, I was like, just lie to us. Just lie about the ceasefire. President Biden said, no ceasefire. I mean, what world do we live in when the Democrats that most of us have voted for, where literally I could not logically explain why he was saying no? Because usually when two people are fighting in an elementary school or whatever, what's the first adult do? Come in and just say, hey guys, let's stop it, cut it up, stop the fight, right? And one could be right, one could be wrong. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we want to stop it. Let's get back to, right? The United States and our leadership failed to just say the most simple, basic, right decision by any political party, by anybody who's right, by anybody who I believe has a moral, principally process to say, we need a ceasefire, we really need to end this war. And I heard so many words that don't mean ceasefire. Cessation of hostility, we want things to end.
A temporary
a
ceasefire.
Temporary ceasefire.
Yeah.
Like, and I couldn't understand why. I mean, the world today is not safe for Palestinians nor Israelis. The world has become
Or Lebanese.
Or Lebanese.
Or Yemenis.
It has become
or
a dangerous
Syrians
place for
because
all of these populations.
Correct.
So I think we need to, as a community, wake up and realize we have political power. We need to build within these political systems. And I personally believe, through the abandoned Biden and some of the work we have done in that general, that the Democratic Party abandoned their principles of taking care of the sanctity of life. And for us to be able to teach the Democratic Party and all parties that we are not going to allow for that to happen, we must create a level of accountability. And if we don't do that, then we are part and parcel of supporting genocide, and we can't do that.
To me, moving beyond in terms of when you're saying we're changing the conversation, it becomes important for you that, you know, you're voting now. By the way, polls are open tomorrow, Wednesday, and Tuesday, so you have time to vote. I mean, so there's no excuse.
Not Wednesday. I want to.
I'm sorry. Tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I apologize.
So I'll clarify. Monday, there's no early voting. It's Sunday, and then Tuesday is election day.
Tuesdays, okay.
Yes.
So you've got those resources. So tomorrow, guys, if you can, make sure you're voting. If you can't, don't forget Tuesday. Like you said, you can ask for time off work to go vote. You will not be punished for missing work, etc., because it's your law. The law protects your right to vote. Really important. Now, what I meant to say was, now what are you going to do on Wednesday? Wednesday, you can't just sit on your hands and just say, okay, we're all done. All right? That's actually when the work starts, because now you're going to find out who won, who didn't win. If you like somebody who didn't win, you got to empower them to figure out how to get them back on the ballot in 2 years. Okay? So, because the beauty of America is it's a land of opportunity. We got to keep opportunity open and running. Number two is, now somebody you like got elected, or even if somebody you didn't like got elected, you got to hold them accountable.
Yes.
Look at what they said and what they promised, and you should follow them. Either have you follow them or your kids follow them. Reach out to organizations like ours to follow them. Okay, we will reach out. We'll make sure that we're maintaining scorecards, not just when they're finally taking office, but from the first day they got elected all the way till they get reelected. They're going to know that we're present, we're there, we're available. So remember, the work just starts after the election. And then here's what's important. That as a Muslim American, you can be on the zoning board, on a school board, on a library board. All right, it's sad or tragic that you have to be involved. You can't. You have to be part of the conversation. No one's going to know your values and your needs, okay, unless you're with them, unless you interact with them. I'll tell you, when people get to know us, they begin to really respect us. They may not love us, although some actually do love us, all right? Some of them actually become Muslim once they get interacting with us, okay? But the key here is that when people start knowing that a guy like Abdulmajid Katranji, you know what? This is a doctor, he's a community leader, he works with Jews, he works with Hindus, he works with Muslims, he works with Christians, he works with Americans, he's part of the community. The familiarity then allows my voice to have strength. When I have an opinion that disagrees with what's seen on the national media, they're going to take what I say equal to, if not greater than, what they're going to hear in terms of whatever messaging is being delivered to the media. So the work starts the day after the election. So your power is that vote, but then the work to maintain and protect that power is everything you do from one election to the next.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that. Wednesday, November 6th. How do we start building, regardless of the outcome?
So I think that first and foremost, we should be encouraged and be content because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has complete control.
Yep.
So no matter what the results are, we have deep faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will get us out of whatever challenges. or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put us in a new situation. So I think as Muslim Americans, this idea that we should be afraid of the election, we should be afraid of after the election, we should be a community that needs help and can't think and can't plan and can't organize shouldn't happen. But I agree with the doctor. If elections create a government, accountability with the government create policies. If you just elect but don't hold them accountable to the policies, and then you leave behind. I'll tell you an example. Most representatives in the state government and even Congress, they spend majority of their time talking to lobbyists. They don't talk to electorates. But if the American Muslim community, we come and we continue to have a conversation with every single elected official, and we can do it through many different ways, whether through their offices locally or even in DC, and even locally here with the state offices, we engage them. The good thing about our community is we don't need everybody to be doing this all day. We need to be able to say, brother, I just went last month, you go next month. And then being able to have that political consciousness, because elections are won, but policies are made between elections.
Correct.
And one of the things that we don't do as a community is we don't actually reach out to them. Many people asked us and said, brother, in the middle of the beginning of this genocide, why they don't pick up the phone call? I said, because you're just calling them now. They don't know you.
Correct.
You don't have any relationship.
You call it midnight.
Right. And we learned from Thomas Massey, Congressman Thomas Massey, that the APAC has a babysitter.
Yep.
So think about that. One person
Attached to every
attached to
congressional
every
member.
man, we have so much sambusa, and we can just attach ourselves to every single congressman, and we as a community can do that. And we do that not just for one issue. We do that for issues that impact us, our neighbors, what is happening now with the horrible storms in the south, hurricanes, as well as many of these issues that we deeply care about. As doctors, you know about the challenges with healthcare.
Correct.
We as a community are a net asset to this nation. We can continue to do that, and we can do that by aligning with our neighbors. And this is the thing I encourage Muslims. Don't just show up to the political spaces only considering issues that impact you specifically. When the moment you show up for your neighbor and the other issues that impact you, that you also care about, one, you learn about other people, and most importantly, they will also show up for you the days that you need.
Right.
And sometimes we may be the lone voice for our entire community. One of the things that happens in city councils is that nobody shows up to city council meetings. The only time they show up is that one issue. Every city council, every state government, every single county, they decide on budgets.
Correct. Correct.
Which
When you're not
directly
at-
impacts
impacts you,
schools.
impacts the
and,
opioid crisis in your neighborhood, the light situation, the parking lot situation. All of these issues are significantly important. People are always wondering, how did this happen? It's somebody telling somebody over there that this needs to be fixed. And if you're not thinking in that way, then you're losing your vote. You're
So-
really not cashing in your vote to be able to be good for you.
I want to pick your brain on one last topic. And I'm going to put it in a two-directional question. November 6th, Donald Trump wins. What happens? November 6th, Kamala Harris wins. What happens? Where do we go? How is each scenario going to play out for us as a community?
I mean, from my perspective, we're victorious no matter who wins. Okay? Because the key here is that people understand that we're present, we're there, all right? And now, and we have leverage, because when the numbers are going to break down, however they're going to figure out, the Harris campaign is going to discover something about what happened or didn't happen with the Muslim vote, and the Trump campaign is going to discover what happened and didn't happen with the Muslim vote. And that's and the fact that they're actually going to have that conversation is going to tell you you've already won. You're on the radar, okay?
Right.
You can be at the table, okay? The key here now is that you're right. Either there's going to be some people with hurt feelings or not hurt feelings. The key for us as a community to say is, you know what? The election is done. Our disagreements internally are over. We move forward for the community as a whole, right? We're not monolith in the sense that I might have a different position on healthcare than you have, okay? But it doesn't change the fact that we both have needs with healthcare. Do you understand my point? So that's where we have to collaborate and cooperate as a community with all these organizations and all these community centers to say, look, what are your needs? What is important? We put those files together and we start delivering them, not only to the campaigns, but to the congressional offices, to the Senate offices, to the city councils, to the library boards, from parental rights, which is going to be mainly a Michigan, like a state level or a local issue, to federal foreign policy, from Gaza to India to the Rohingya to the Uyghur, right? These are all things that we can, as a community, we have to keep. And then, like the good brother outlined, is that you must maintain a continual dialogue with whoever the winner is. So for us, it's not about who wins, all right? It's let me repeat, it's not about who wins. It's about making sure that we get in there and get to the people that are around these presidents. Because remember, the presidency is not an individual. It's a collection of advisors, of secretaries, of appointed staff, of career politicians that compromise the name of the presidency. We got to get around there. We got to engage them. We got to communicate. And they got to know that we're present. And they got to know then that, whether we voted for them or didn't vote for them, we're going to hold them accountable while they're in power, because the next time around, we're going to be even stronger, even louder, and even firmer.
I completely agree. And the only thing I would add is that, first of all, like you said, regardless of who wins, the situation of the American Muslim community is much better. We have become politically engaged in the last year. We have created more C4s and PACs than ever before. While we don't know, we're still struggling with, but we have now become a lot more mature as a Muslim community in the political exit. And with even what I will call a victory, whatever that victory is, whether what happened with Harris or Trump, it doesn't matter. What I will say is that we will realize our political power, and we will realize if there was some left at the table, what is left and what we can double down and triple down. And what we will also project is that the American Muslim community could no longer be ignored in presidential elections, at least at the minimum, and as well as other state and county and federal.
So we are ensuring essentially that whatever political conversation takes place in the future, it runs through Muslims before it gets to the table.
Well,
we will be treated as a sizable, recognizable, organized community that will have their say. And if we're ignored, we will hold those people accountable.
Absolutely. And look, what makes America great, is, and I'm not trying to posit any particular campaign's language, but there is a greatness to the United States. Because after 9/11, Keith Ellison, first Muslim congressperson, right, was elected to the Congress. And then shortly thereafter, Andre Carson, all right? And then shortly thereafter, Keith leaves, and then Ilhan Omar, a mutahajjiba, is in Congress, right? And thereafter, Rashida Tlaib is also in Congress, all right? Now, the key here is Muslims are already there, right? So we need to stop feeling like we're second class. You're already in Congress. Inshallah, we'll be in the Senate, maybe vice president and president down the line.
And hopefully in multiple parties and multiple infrastructure.
Exactly. And there are Republicans. As a matter of fact, if you look at the breakdown, I can't remember, but I think on like what they call state level and national level, and please forgive me, my data is a little bit off. But I believe it was like 32 are on the Democratic side, 16 are on the Republican side. Okay, so there are state reps or state county commissioners, etc., that are on the Republican side. So no, both parties have a home for us. So what's really critical here is we need to stop being ashamed or embarrassed or shy to say I'm here, I'm present, I'm available, and this is what I'm for and what I'm about.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Jaylani, Dr. Katranji. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all for joining us in this live stream and this series of conversations around the 2024 presidential election, the power of the Muslim vote being the margin of victory. And I think we've already gotten there. We are the margin of the change so far. We will see how that will reflect on November 5th, inshallah. We will be coming back to you tomorrow and until Election Day with more coverage and more conversations around this topic. Jazakumullah khair and assalamu alaikum.